Everything is fine. Everything's not fine. Okay. All right, let's dig into it. Pharmacists are not as distressed. So pharmacy is good now. People are less stressed than ever before. There's not been a single problem to be worried about.
Wait a minute.
And everything is going just a-okay. Well, the Well-Being Index 2023 report just got released and shows, according to their research, that pharmacists in general are less stressed than before the pandemic. I haven't seen a report like this in quite some time, so let's jump into the details of what this report says, what it could mean for you in the future of pharmacy, and maybe a career path that would be less stressful than the one that you're in now. Well-Being Index is a major corporation that provides basically well-being programs for healthcare institutions to implement. They have a training program, they've got guidelines, they've got studies that are being done at major health institutes. And I think overall their research and work is promising, but it's not individualized. Meaning that I think overall they're doing a good job at trying to improve workplaces, but there's still a lot of work to be done. In the most recent report, they analyzed over 2,500 pharmacist assessments, and they found that overall the mean distress has decreased over time. The mean or average has decreased from 2019 of a 3.25 to 2023 a 2.59. Pretty significant, about 0.75. What does that actually mean? I don't know. I have so many questions when I think about this. Who did they ask? Where are these people working? Is it at a certain chain? Is it at a certain hospital? They interviewed pharmacists from across our industry in multiple sectors, but was it the same people? We don't know that yet, but I think it's highlighting an interesting trend. I mean, just from 2019 to 2020, the drop happened then. So what you're telling me, Well-Being Index, is that the pandemic was a less distressful time than before it in healthcare. Objectively, that cannot be true. That can't be the case. There's so much I don't know, but I'm looking at the data here, and this says pharmacy distress was lower during the pandemic. I don't know what to believe anymore. Look, since October 2021, the Pharmacy Workplace and Wellbeing Reporting Portal, which was started up by the APHA and the NASPA, said that there's been over 1,300 reports of workplace conditions because I used to think that burnout was an individual problem. Like, if you just fix the workplace, if you just meditated enough, then it'll be fine. And the research has unequivocally shown that that's not true. The workplace is the cause of burnout conditions. So the workplace has to change in order to fix burnout. Meditate more, making sure that you exercise regularly is not enough to fix your burnout. I don't believe that they are the cure for burnout because they are often focused on you as an individual, hoping to provide some sort of intervention in order to help you be more in touch with your well-being. But what we know from job satisfaction research, it is the environment, the work environment, that causes people to either be satisfied or dissatisfied. Doing the work, the relationships you have, the feeling of accomplishment or lack thereof all play this complex role of influencing what makes you happy. And my perception, after working with hundreds and thousands now of pharmacists from various sectors, from clinical specialists to retail chain pharmacists, is that the environment causes burnout, and no amount of meditation, extra sleep, or even vacationing can help you overcome burnout. It is the environment that's causing it, and so that has to change. Either you leaving the environment fixes it, or a total overhaul on how the work environment even operates. Now, the Wellbeing Report doesn't share this commentary that I'm sharing with you. This is based upon my experience, but I thought it important to note here. When you break down well-being by stages of age, you find an interesting transition. You can see that the vast majority of people who are near the end of their career over age 65 have a high level of fulfillment. These are people who probably, one, are motivated to fill out an assessment on the factor. These are people who probably have things figured out by now. If you're over 65 and you're still working in healthcare, it's probably because you love it. Or maybe you want that house in Cancun, I don't know. Meanwhile, those that are in the millennial generation, typically, the 35s to 44-year-olds, have the highest level of distress and the lowest rating of thriving professionally. Again, I'm not 100% clear on how they rate what's distressed, what's struggling, what's okay, and what's thriving. I think that's up to a little bit of interpretation here, but it still gives you a snapshot of where people are at generationally. Now, if you break this down by sector, you'll see some trends that may not surprise you. Like, community pharmacists exhibit the highest rate of distress at 29%. Basically, half of everyone in the community pharmacy setting is saying, we're not happy. We're not enjoying what we do. While a quarter of people in the community chains are saying that they thrive here, they love it. I would wonder if those who are thriving are more in management positions or higher level positions. Don't have data to back that up, but that's something I would speculate. Or in stores that have a lower volume or have adequate support. Meanwhile, in community independent pharmacy, there are almost twice the amount of thriving pharmacists in this setting when compared to community pharmacy practice. And something that I did find that was interesting is that the lowest amount of distress, that also being the largest percentage of pharmacists reporting that they were thriving in this career field. I mean, I can tell you from experience that what pharmacists come to us for is they want a transition into that career path. Pharmacists are not coming to us in droves saying, we want to transition into long-term care or into community chains. In fact, I would say the vast majority of our clients transition into pharma, academia, AmCare, specialty pharmacy, and clinical pharmacy roles, which it's nice to see that the vast majority of these jobs in those sectors report a high level of thriving or just being okay. Another outlier is LTC pharmacists say they're just okay. They're fine. They're doing their job. They're not thriving and they're just existing, I guess. Meanwhile, if you break this down by occupation title, the other category is the most thriving job title. You're not going to find that if you type in other pharmacist on LinkedIn or Indeed. But what I take that to mean is non-traditional titles, titles that you probably think are made up. Sometimes people will get into a pharma job, for example, and they make up titles for the person in that role. Meanwhile, the least thriving and most distressed job title category is the pharmacy manager or executive. And it's no surprise. Lots of pharmacists who come into our program were once directors, assistant directors, or PICs or managers of pharmacies. And we find that they want to step down because the added stress, the not huge bump in pay, and the less support provided to them ultimately leads to a very stressful job that just isn't worth it. Another thing to note too is that basically half of pharmacy students are struggling or distressed. If you're a student watching this, I'd like to know, where are you at in that category? Are you like, yeah, I'm struggling, I'm not thriving, this is hard, this is difficult, and I'm not too feeling good about the prospects of my future career? Let me know if you feel that way. Lack of staff since 2021, according to the Well-Being Index, is the main reason why so many pharmacists are struggling with stress in the workplace. Even though companies are reporting higher profits than ever, it seems like they're not putting their profit back into the company because they are putting it out to dividends for the stock owners, because they're not hiring appropriate amounts of staff for these positions. Nearly a quarter of all pharmacists reported that they were working beyond their contracted hours. I'm honestly surprised that number is not higher. When I talk with pharmacists, the general feel I get from almost everyone is that they are willing to do whatever it takes for patients. They often put themselves at risk for others just so that they make sure they're doing a good job, whether it's for a patient, a colleague, a coworker, or support staff. To hear it's actually that low was actually a little bit surprising for me. Meanwhile, one of the reasons why they say that workplaces are so short-staffed is because these major corporations can't seem to find pharmacists to fulfill in these roles. I've talked about this in a separate video about pharmacist shortage, and I believe that this is just not true. I think that there's a shortage of people willing to work in these high stressful situations. So what's the situation here for pharmacists? Well, for those that are distressed, it's basically heavy workload, long hours, and demanding patient interactions. The combination of these things are ripe factors, well-documented research factors, that this is going to cause burnout, distress, whatever you want to call it. It's going to make people unhappy and want to leave. It is a direct reflection for why we have seen so many people disinterested in our profession, because we've made our voices heard through online, Reddit, social media, whatever. We're quitting this career path because the environments are not conducive for us to be happy. Now, I have to say this every time I point out the negatives about our profession. This isn't true everywhere. There are good people, executives, and even mid-level managers at lots of these hospitals and retail chains. There's good people, but it's not true for the vast majority of them, because the burnout rates don't lie. Whether you look at community or hospital positions, the burnout rates are 50 to 70%. I think over the last 5 years, we have seen a shift in healthcare. We have seen a focus on burnout, and then it became well-being over the last 4 years or so, ever since the pandemic. And I think companies are starting to realize that they have to value this more, because if they don't, they will lose their power. It's why we see unions now forming within our profession, which has not happened in a long time. CVS and Walgreens pharmacists just announced their unionization efforts. What's the future hold? I think that the new wave of pharmacists coming into the market will have more power than previously understood. If you think that that isn't true, then why is it that retail chains, employers for over 50% of our profession, are struggling to find entry-level community pharmacist candidates for their jobs? And they're offering bonuses of $50,000, $70,000, and even up to, in crazy circumstances, $100,000 sign-on bonuses. It isn't because there's a lack of pharmacists in general to take these jobs. It is because they cannot find people willing to work in these high stressful situations for the salaries that are being offered. I think that this report gives some interesting insights about who is stressed, who isn't. I don't know if I really agree. I mean, I can't argue with the data, but the fact that they say that pharmacists overall are distressed, I think is really interesting. There's so much I don't know, and I would love to dig into the data, because I just have such a hard time believing the fact that distress decreased during the opening year of the pandemic. I mean, maybe the surveys were taken at right before the pandemic, but pharmacy didn't change significantly for the better between 2019 and 2020. So what was it? What did you guys change? I want to know. Hopefully someone from Well-Being I can reach out to and interview and have maybe on our podcast. Let me know if you want to do that in the comments. I'd be curious myself to have a conversation with them. How are you guys measuring this? Who are these people that you're interviewing? How are you reaching out to them? Are you motivating them to fill out the survey? There's so many questions that I want to know, and maybe you want to know as well. Thanks for watching this episode. I hope that this was informative for you and maybe highlighting some career paths that you're interested in looking at. If this is something that you enjoyed, please let us know, like, comment, subscribe. Until we see you in the next episode, take care.